Very full weekend in which I focused exclusively on the water distribution system with the Navy. Over the last 2 days, I've met with senior leadership of our Navy as well as our Army. I have spoken with Governor Ige, with Mayor Blangiardi, with Director Char, with the folks at the University of Hawaii who have done some of the testing and the evaluation of the testing. I have personally visited the affected neighborhoods, both at Aliamanu, a military reservation, as well as down at Halsey Terrace. I've talked to residents in their homes. I have visited the Army's Emergency Response Center in Aliamanu. I've visited Red Hill Elementary School. I've tried to understand this every which way I can over the last few days. We've had discussions with the Navy throughout this time, and I've been in direct communication with my colleagues on the congressional delegation as well throughout. This is not obviously our first effort in this area. We collectively have asked the Navy twice in the last month on a formal basis to review its operations around Red Hill and its fuel distribution system in the communities served by the Navy, which, as you all know at this point, are not just Navy, but Army, Coast Guard, Air Force, as well as civilian contractors, anybody on our military bases. The delegation met with Secretary of the Navy Del Toro personally, by Zoom, but the four of us on the phone with him just a week ago to try to communicate the urgency of the situation to the highest levels of the Navy. And you will all have Secretary Del Toro here in a few days. We have urged him to publicly talk to you, to the media, to the community. I hope he takes that advice. And so obviously we are extremely concerned, as is everybody else. So let me give you a couple of observations and areas that I think we definitely all need to work on together. So number one, our number one priority has to be the residents that are affected. These are our brothers and sisters. Most of them are in our military. As long as they're here in Hawaii, they are our ohana, and they're my constituents. And we have to do what we can. They have suffered direct consequences. They have become sick. Their pets have died. They have been dislocated. They have questions across the board. They have needs, and they have long-term concerns. Perhaps they are sick now and they have recovered, but what does that mean down the road for them? These are real concerns, and that has to be number one. And I think it is, in fact, number one to the folks that are involved. Certainly, the folks that have been affected are getting direct assistance now from their military, as well as us, by the way. We have great people in our military working today, yesterday, and tomorrow to take care of the folks that need to be taken care of. We have tried to help them. I just spoke with Mayor Blangiardi by arranging, hotel rooms where they can stay. They have real-world needs in terms of, for example, how do they get their children from Waikiki hotels to schools during the day. And so they have to be number one. I think number two, we have to understand exactly what happened, why it happened, when it happened, where it happened, and how to prevent it from happening again. This is the immediate concern. And we don't have that answer yet. We have done a variety of testing through the Navy. Obviously, you all know that the Department of Health has done its own testing, and some of the media stations have done testing. And that testing continues today. But to date, there is no conclusive, widely accepted answer to what happened, when, why, how, and how to prevent it. We've had inconclusive. We've certainly seen petroleum products in some amounts in some of the tests, but it has not been confirmed if that is, fuel, including Red Hill fuel, or whether it's some other petroleum product such as motor oil or any number of other things that could account for petroleum testing. We have thus far tested fairly narrowly to try to determine whether, in fact, this was fuel. But we have not gone to broader testing yet, we being, again, the Navy, the Department of Health, and others, to determine whether, in fact, what other causes there may be. I think we are all operating on some working assumption that this is somehow connected to the leaks at Red Hill on November 20th and probably earlier. But thus far, we don't have that, as far as I can determine at least. Nobody has told me, yes, we all agree that's exactly what happened. Now, we obviously have to figure this out because we have to figure out how to mitigate it and how to contain it and how to eliminate it, especially as we see our military families in Ohana going back into their homes, which we hope will happen. And this is not an idle concern, because there's only, there are certainly we're going to take care of them as long as it takes. But clearly we and they want these answers to return to any semblance of a normal life. And so those are the two main priorities that I think we all have to pursue right now. Now, there's some broader things that are going on that I believe need to be said. Number one, obviously, our trust in our Navy to operate not only the Red Hill fuel tanks, but the entire Navy water distribution system has been seriously compromised at this point, if not broken. And so to expect the Navy itself to determine exactly what happened and why, and to decide what to do about this, I don't think is acceptable. It does have to involve a broader range of evaluation, of oversight, of expertise, of looking over the Navy's shoulder. And we are pursuing that at the congressional delegation. That is why we asked the Navy to appoint its Inspector General to review the operations of Red Hill in some respects. And the Inspector General is the independent arm of the Navy, has no accountability at all to the Navy leadership. We may want to go further than that and have independent evaluations from outside just the Inspector General. But somehow we have to get to the bottom of not only what happened and why, but how to prevent it and how to deal with longer term concerns. Number two, in that connection, one of the critical failings to date has been a lack of coordination among the Navy, the Department of Health, the Environmental Protection Agency, and others to muster the resources and information and collective expertise and resources to be able to figure out what happened, why, and how. And this is primarily, from my viewpoint, a problem with the Navy. The Navy has not been forthcoming, immediately forthcoming, with test results and with other information requested by the state of Hawaii and by the EPA, and that is a critical failing that we cannot accept anymore. Communicated this directly to Admiral Paparo. We have communicated that to the higher levels of the Navy at this point, that the idea that this is your problem exclusively and you get to review the possibilities and to figure out what to do about it and to implement on your own without including anybody else, is not acceptable. And so, on a very, very clear observation, we need a far different construct for how the testing is performed, what kind of testing is performed, and immediate transparency and distribution of results. Everybody has an interest in what these results are, and only if we act collectively can we get to the bottom of this as soon as possible. And I expect to communicate that further and to take action along those lines as much as I can, and I believe the delegation as well, to make that happen. That definitely has to happen immediately. We obviously, once we take care of the immediate priorities, which is our Ohana, and what happened and why, and to try to address this issue to certainly go back to the bigger picture questions about Red Hill fuel tank. Again, I don't know as I sit here. I don't have a clear indication as I sit here about whether and to what extent the leaks at Red Hill over the last couple of months, including just a few weeks ago, do have a causal connection. Again, working assumption is, hey, if you have a leak at Red Hill and people get sick 10 days after that or less, there is a connection, but we haven't demonstrated that yet. So we need to get through that and figure that out. But there is a broader problem with Red Hill, as we all know at this point. A problem really, as the delegation spoke just the other day in our joint statement of 2 days ago, we called it an organizational crisis issue. That the Navy has run Red Hill fuel tanks and its distribution system in an atmosphere that simply has increasingly not inspired public confidence, has made us all feel that its risk calculation, and we all know that Red Hill is in fact critical to our national security. There is no question about that. But if the calculation of preserving a national security asset presents unacceptable risk to us, to our drinking water, to our lives, that's not a risk that I or anybody else is willing or should be asked to accept. And so the question is, can we, in fact, take Red Hill to a zero risk tolerance profile under which we can feel comfortable with any kind of an operation there and maintain our national security? And that question has to be reviewed anew and answered. And if the answer is that they cannot eliminate risk, then Red Hill should not continue. We're obviously going down the road on several avenues along those lines, whether it be secondary containment, whether it be integrity of the pipelines. I and the delegation have asked for these for the funding for all of this, and actually not just asked, but mandated the increased standard testing, the increased improvements at Red Hill. We did that even before this incident, and we're still obviously continuing that right now. But it also takes the Department of Defense to substantially ramp up its prioritization of Red Hill and addressing legitimate concerns with its operation. Thus far, the Department of Defense has not sufficiently prioritized Red Hill, in my view. And by prioritizing it, I refer to actually including it in its budgetary requests, actually fighting for it inside the President's budget, inside the Office of Management and Budget. These are the things that have to happen. We're well positioned as a delegation to require these items with 2 of us on the Armed Services Committee and 2 of us on the Appropriations Committee. But as we have all said directly to the Secretary of the Navy and to our senior military leadership, it is not acceptable for you to expect us to do this as a congressional delegation when you're not going to do it up front as a Department of Defense. So either do that or don't expect us to support you at this point.
What do you say to the people who might have gone along with the double-line tanks, but now, after seeing what's happened with the Navy's residential area and the Navy's own families, that we need to drain those tanks and move them?
Well, I think first of all, what we know so far is that in this particular situation, the tanks are not the issue. There's nobody saying that there was any causal connection to the tanks themselves. If there was a connection, it had to do with the pipelines that move fuel to and from those tanks. What I'm saying is we have to focus on the immediate crisis, which is help the families and stabilize the immediate situation. And then we do have to ask those questions. I mean, secondary containment, if and as we continue, Red Hill in any way, shape, or form has to be part of that solution. I cannot envision any solution for Red Hill under which we would not provide for secondary containment. But clearly, that has to be on the table.
Congressman, what do you think about some complaints that have been made for the Department of Justice, it's going back to 2014, to investigate the Navy's handling of the Red Hill storage, specifically their communication with environmental regulators, the State Department of Health? Do you think DOJ should conduct an independent probe while the Navy's handled fuel storage up there?
Well, I think that somebody needs to conduct an independent review of the Navy's operations at Red Hill overall. And so I believe that the Inspector General is one place to start, not the only place. Clearly, the Department of Justice is not equipped to do that from a pure scientific engineering operational perspective. But certainly, if any such review by the Inspector General reveals any kind of wrongdoing in any kind of lack of statutory compliance in the operation of Red Hill, they should be referred to the Department of Justice for action.
Some people say that the Navy's being more reactive than proactive in this situation. During your tour, did you see them more kind of reacting to providing water, or were they being like kind of more proactive, like this is what's going to be done, this is how we're going to fix it in the future?
My observation is that the Navy has definitely been deficient in terms of its basic crisis management here. I think they obviously were caught flat-footed when the leaks, when the complaints first came from their communities. They have not reacted as fast, as comprehensively, as involved in the community as they should have. I think they're doing better now. So I do want to recognize that they are taking this seriously, that they have tried to adjust. They're really having to pursue two things at the same time. Number one is crisis management and helping their families. And number two, finding out what exactly happened and why and how and to develop a plan. Because they're the ones that are responsible for this system. The Army has done a tremendous job of crisis management, as any of you who have been to Liamanu can attest. I mean, they've got their stuff together. But they are dependent on the Navy for this solution. And so certainly one observation that I come away with is any silos in the services as to, hey, the Navy's going to do this and the Army's not going to get involved in that. Those silos have to fall away immediately. And in fact, I have observed in the last couple of days that has happened. We have, for example, the Navy welcoming the Army into the Navy housing. I was down at Halsey Terrace yesterday, and I had there the Navy operating water distribution. I had the Army operating some potable water supplies, and I had the Marines operating a mobile laundry and shower facility for the residents. That's what we need here. Everybody has to pony up and pitch in to get this job done in a crisis. And the other thing that I think could have been done a lot faster from a crisis management is the Navy, including everybody right off the bat in really an emergency response. They really started out trying to do it themselves, and that was never going to be possible in this situation.
You paid a visit to the facility following the November 20th release and the complaints about the fumes from the Foster Village and the Liamanu residents. What was the takeaway from that site visit?
My takeaway, I've been in Red Hill now 3 times. And the first 2 times I went, at Red Hill you have an upper shaft which is across the tops of the tanks, and you get a good sense in the upper shaft of the tanks themselves. You go in one tank. But what I hadn't done until that visit, which I did with Representative Kahele and our teams jointly, I had not been in the lower shaft, and that's where you have the pipeline infrastructure. That's where you have, we saw the site of some of the incidents in May, as well as we couldn't actually see where the suspected break was in the November 20th incident. But when you get to the bottom shaft, you realize that, again, Red Hill is not just about tanks, it's about pipelines. It's an intricate infrastructure, and it is my takeaway was you got to take care of the whole ball of wax to focus on the tanks itself. Now that seems obvious, but until you get there and look at them, you don't really get a sense of that. And we tracked exactly what the possibility was of that November 20th leak getting somehow into the air and water in the Red Hill shaft. So I do understand how that could have happened, but again, we don't have the demonstrated testing and to just say, yes, that's exactly what happened. And so you have to rule out other possibilities. For example, I've talked to some people over the weekend, these are experts, not affiliated with the Navy, who have speculated on whether this is related to the fuel tanks, whether this is related to the actual water distribution system on Pearl Harbor itself. We all know that Pearl Harbor and our military have been operating for decades now in various environmental regimes. Now I think they operate pretty safely, but you don't know what maybe you don't know, and so we have to exhaust all possibilities.
And then there were some leaks into Pearl Harbor, and we were told that these were older discharges. What assurances, do you feel assured with what you're hearing about those incidents?
Well, I think the best answer is at this point, I don't feel assured of anything. And that's what trust is about. If the Navy told me something a couple of years back about that, okay, fine. But given really what's happened in the last few months, especially now, as I said directly to the Secretary of the Navy, look, where I probably would have mostly trusted the Navy, now I just have to be skeptical. I have to ask myself to review that independently. I can't just take your word for it. Those particular leaks at the Kilo Pier do appear to be related, to not be related to Red Hill fuel tanks specifically. There is a fairly large oil spill under that pier, and it appears that was the source of those leaks.
For both Kilo and Hotel?
Yes.
Do you think that that possibly maybe any work that was done by Hart along that guideway might have disturbed some of the older discharges in that area? I mean,
I've never heard that mentioned. I know obviously that Hart crosses the Red Hill fuel line right above Aliamanu, as I recall. And so, no, that's not right. It's in a different location. It's further down. So you can't. I don't think you can rule anything out at this point. We do have to figure this out. I've never heard it brought up as a suspicion or as a working hypothesis by anybody.
Congressman, a lot of people are calling for Red Hill to be shut down. It's an 80-year-old facility, and the Navy should transition into some other form of fuel storage. Do you believe it's time to start winding down and closing the facility?
I certainly think we have to think about it. I think we have to think it through. Again, my focus right now is the immediate crisis, taking care of the families, taking care of trying to resolve what happened and get things stabilized. I'm not at all prepared to accept the proposition that Red Hill must continue from a national security perspective. But I certainly believe that we've got to step back and ask all of those questions all over again to again see whether there is any what the scenarios are. Can the Navy operate in a way that engenders public trust and addresses national security concerns? Again, my answer is if they can't, then the answer is no. You should start to wind Red Hill down. But I do believe that we owe it all around to do that in a very deliberative way. Certainly, well, I'll leave it at that.
If it does continue, Congressman, does there need to be change, improvements, based on the discussions you've had?
Absolutely. There's no question about it. I think, without significant change, without significant improvements, it's hard for me to imagine how you would be able to simply, stabilize the situation today and then continue on with any kind of current status quo. I think, as I said earlier, the first requirement would be an independent and trustworthy plan for reducing any risk at Red Hill, at the Red Hill fuel containments, number one. Number two, I would certainly have to see the Department of Defense pony up on that. Like, to come up with a plan and then not fund it in the president's budget is not acceptable at all. And then number three, I think that there needs to be a far greater and more significant oversight of the operation outside of the Navy proper. Some ability to look over the Navy's shoulder, because nobody has really looked over the Navy's shoulder sufficiently to include the state. And the state of Hawaii is saying we're not going to accept that anymore. And I completely support the state of Hawaii saying that, and the EPA as well. And so let's not forget that we have a crisis to handle right now, and we need to get through this crisis. We have a contested case hearing in action, which is legitimately being continued for further facts, and should continue until those facts are answered. And we have a decision to make at the state level as to whether to allow that permit to operate, to continue, and if so, under what conditions. And so this is our opportunity, and this is where these questions, one place where these questions can be answered, and I'm completely supportive of that process.
You know, we're coming up on the 8-year anniversary of the big fuel spill back in 2014. In your discussions, with the military, I mean, we don't know where that fuel went. I mean, do they have any indication that maybe that's what's turned up in the water?
One of those questions that is unanswered right now, from my perspective. First of all, was the cause of most of that fuel is accounted for, as I recall. I mean, it's all but, there is some that's unaccounted for, so I'm not going to say it's all accounted for. And again, I would say that's according to what the Navy says. So I think anything is fair game to double check and ask for full validation and verification and independent analysis if others feel that that's appropriate. And I would hope the Navy feels that's appropriate too. But again, to ask Naval Facilities Command to review itself at this point is not going to work. There are, to get into the weeds on this, there's a lot we still don't know about the interaction of any potential spills at Red Hill with water movement and our aquifer. For example, we've had a long discussion with the Navy about, okay, what if there was fuel discharged into the aquifer? Which direction would it move, and what would we do about it? And the Navy's view of that is this would not be a major issue, because the plume would move towards Pearl Harbor, and we'd basically be able to suck it up. And the state has disagreed with that and has asked for a trace test so that they could actually test that hypothesis. The Navy has been resistant to that. That's not going to be acceptable anymore. You've got to cooperate with legitimate concerns about the operation, and if you're not going to do that, then I don't see how you can continue it.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, sir.